There's no conflicts here.
We're all set.
Coming in or coming out.
Last item.
That's not a road.
Everyone.
A road you want to come out to.
Gonna bang it harder.
Folks, we'd like to go home at some point tonight, so if you
Okay.
can settle down.
Next item is a workshop. This is Woodmont Commons PUD master plan discussion, and we've had a previous discussion last month, and this is round two, and turn it over to Mr. Kettenbach and Mr. Shellman. I remember Chill, but that's Shellman. Pardon me.
For the record, my name is Mike Kettenbach. I'm the proponent of the project. I'm here with Mr. Mark Chillman. We were here a month ago. We're here again. I hope you've all had time to digest what was put before you before, and we're back here tonight to start discussing what we've proposed and what your ideas are, and to continue the process here for the master plan for Woodmont Commons. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Mark, and we'll continue our dialogue as we did last month. Thank you.
Okay, I'm actually Rick.
Rick, excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But that's okay. I don't know if the board members had any time to look at any of the materials that were submitted a month ago. A little update on what's taken
I was going
place.
to say, you could probably give us a review, and there's people here probably weren't here last month, that would be good for them.
I'll give you a quick update first. Basically taking direction from the board and also my client. Since the last meeting, we've met with folks in Derry. We met with some counselors, the DPW, the Planning and Economic Development Director, and had a good chat. We're going to keep them informed by each time I submit materials to Tim. I'm submitting to their Planning and Economic Developer at the same time so that they can see what's happening. And at some point in time, it's not set yet, we're going to have a joint meeting with their planning board and their council just to talk about the project so they can understand it and start to get their arms around it. The other day, we also met with the police chief and his captain and brought them up to speed with the project. I won't go so far as to say they like the project because that's not really their purview, but they would like to have a presence in the first phase village, which would be near the new market basket, and perhaps a presence on the other side of 93. They hadn't really decided. That's so far in the future at this point in time that they just don't know. We also met with fire, and that's actually one of the requirements in your submission requirements, and I'm just going to go to my list, which is a little bit perhaps easier. 2.8.9.2.17, and we discussed the requirement with the fire department and have agreed on some language that basically says that the project isn't going to be dealt with from a firefighting perspective any differently than any other part of town, except that due to its scale, at some point they will want a small station of some sort that will certainly have an ambulance, and depending on how the mix works out, some other equipment. And they've got long-range staffing thoughts in mind and everything, but that language is in the package that was submitted, page 14.
The police department also indicated they would like to have a presence there as well, and they thought that one building would serve both of them quite well. And they thought that it would also help them in their community policing as well to have a street front location, and also emergency services thought that would be a good thing to have street level walk-in as well, just for any number of reasons. And they also felt that at least an ambulance and possibly another piece of apparatus as the future goes along, but to plan for it now would be the thing to do. And both of them preferred to have a presence in the southerly portion because they felt they could service both well from there within minutes. And then the police thought they would also like to have a presence up on the westerly side as well at a later date. Police also indicated that if there were issues with policing, that there might be the same thing that takes place at the airport, and there would be something that would be done contractually to ensure that there's always a police presence in the area at all times.
And the police department actually understood the more pedestrian scale concept of a station or a presence here, as opposed to a public safety building off, in a cornfield surrounded by parking. Whereas here it could perhaps be in a townhouse type building, right up to the street with a sidewalk, more of an urban type station. And they understood it, thought it was pretty nice, thought it would work.
And one of the other things we discussed was also the possibility of a DAV presence in the same area, maybe adjacent or part of it, so that people could come for their licensing requirements and plates and things like that at the same time. So that kind of use is a good municipal use, and would create a little more synergy and foot traffic in the town center type thing as well. So everybody understood it, and that also came out in the other charrette that we had with the public employees back in June.
So to help maybe with some folks who weren't here last month, I didn't bring the full last month's presentation because I didn't want to subject the board to that every month. Maybe we should post that. Actually, Tim's already posted it. So people can go to the town website and see the entire presentation. I think what I'll do is I'll just go quickly through the slides that I have tonight and then come back to this list, because this list lists the various submission requirements that are in the ordinance, including some optional ones where the board can, you guys can always ask for something like a study. I don't know at this stage what and whether something like that would be appropriate, but it's certainly there as an option. And I thought if we started to go through it, we could agree that, yep, you've got the present zoning indicated on page 2. That's great, or whatever. So we can basically start to take bites of the elephant, and at some point we'll have consumed the whole thing. So,
Okay.
do you want to say something, Mr. Chairman?
No, just doing some reading here, I'm trying to listen at the same time, so. But
I'm going to come back to that list.
Yeah.
I just wanted to run through quickly this first sheet and what it shows. Basically, what these various sheets do is they attempt to address the submission requirements that were previously listed. As I mentioned earlier, this first page lists the overall maxima for the project, and it depicts one possible configuration of streets and buildings and that sort of thing. And then we can talk about this sort of detail on the next page, probably in greater detail. I'm sure certainly we will talk in greater detail. I've got a delicate balance of trying to keep the most flexibility for my clients, but provide you with some understanding of what it is you're approving. And that's a tension, honestly. So the first division from page 1 is that which is east of 93 and that which is west. If you add up everything on W1 and W2, you will come up with a little bit more than what's on the first page because of that flexibility factor. The next page breaks it down a little bit further. And here we've, and this is a restatement of something from the last meeting, that kind of turns out looking kind of sicky green color when it's projected. It actually looks yellow on my computer. We're showing residential, single-family residential adjacent with abutting single-family residential, and the package so far says we can't change that. That's something that's fixed. Now I would take to mean that if these lots got bigger, for example, deeper, that could be an okay thing, but that they shouldn't get smaller because the intent is to match basically what's nearby. And I think that was the intent of the ordinance too, with the buffer provisions that are in it. We've added topography, wetlands, And then, this is the first page of the written portion of the master plan. Again, this is for folks who weren't here last month. This document is now 14, 15 pages. And this is in addition to the plan sheets to provide sort of additional rules of how the project will get built out and it comes back for site plan and subdivision. This process does not give the applicant the right to build anything. It only, once approved, will give him basically a revised zoning ordinance to then come back to seek subdivision and site plan applications.
Yes, yep.
So, I'm at your service. I can answer questions. We can start going through this list.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, John?
so if we're gonna, there's, I've been involved with this, quite some time at this point, and there's always been something that's bugged me a little bit. And, and I haven't been able to quite put my finger on it until recently. After reading things and looking at these pieces and, and I didn't grow up here, but my family did. And then I, started listening to what people are saying in the community. And what I keep hearing is I keep hearing this being presented as the town center. I view it more as a village. But what I keep hearing from the people in the community is that the town center exists already. It exists at, Pillsbury and Mammoth Road. And Londonderry, from the town my wife grew up in, is different than what's being presented. This is the change. Change. Some people thought change was good a couple of years ago. Some people aren't really happy with that change. But but change needs to be managed. It's never going to be the town center near term. It's a 20-year project. I don't know what the marketing word is for it, but the people of this town know where the town center is. And that's where the parades are, and that's where Old Home Day happens. And that's what this town is all about. That's where the memorials are, et cetera. And what I would probably, it's a suggestion, but as you continue to develop your master plan, I think you almost have to look at it as, I explained to somebody, things are normal until there's a new normal. A new normal is, after someone's spouse dies, there has to be a new normal. This is, in my mind, this is that drastic of a change. And I've had a long time to think about this, probably the better part of 18 months. But I finally think I've figured out the question I've been trying to ask all that time. I'm not expecting an answer, I'm just making a statement.
Well, I am not going to call this project the town center of Londonderry. It's not. It's a big project. It will have its own centers. It will have its own neighborhood centers. Now, what happens 20, 30, 40 years from now, I don't know. I'm not going to try to predict it. I hope it's a very nice place. I hope we're proud of it. And I hope some people consider it their neighborhood center. I'm sure they will. But this town has a lot of history. And you remember that stack of history books that John Michaels gave me. You can't wipe that out. You don't want to wipe that out. You don't want to turn your back on it. You'd be proud of it. And the town grew in various locations and in various formats for a very long time, just like Portsmouth, where I live. And this is just, it's new, it's different, and yet it's traditional. That's the irony. If we were planning this project in 1810, we would be planning it much the same physical manner because we would be planning it without thinking about automobiles. And that's, this project accommodates the automobile, but it's not dependent on the automobile. So hopefully in the future, it will be a very nice place.
I think, John, just to carry it a little bit further, I think in the charrettes, we were showing how you could walk from one section to another, and each one of those are centers in these neighborhoods. And I think that's what we're trying to create, is a synergistic area where we have a connection of neighborhoods, not necessarily a new town center, but a series of neighborhoods that are connected and have commonality.
I understand. I'm also the umpire chief over at LAFA, so I get to see 1,200 kids at a time, and I can tell you for sure this town wasn't built based on the automobile. I mean, because I drive 7 or 8 miles everywhere I go, and I get the whole thing of being able to walk places and everything. But what you know, at least for me, sitting on this planning board, and you know, and I may not be here next year, or I may or not, but for me, the people of this town came here for a reason. It's the reason they enjoy the town the way it is today. Some, and there are people who favor this change that I've heard. There are people that question it. There are people that talk about density. There are people that talk about what traffic it will bring to the town and everything. As you develop your master plan, I think there needs to be, I can't come up with a better phrase than the new normal, because that's what it's going to be. Because it will become normal at some point as this builds out over a 20-year period. I don't know how, I can't predict the future. I leave that to people smarter than me. But, you know, I think that's the way we have to build this, having never done it before. I mean, we didn't do it. We're all doing this new. So, like I said, I'm not looking for a response. I'm just trying to express to you what I've heard over the last 2 months.
There's a lot of misconceptions. We had some discussions about that, some of those with the firemen. There was one conception that there would be 3,500 hotel rooms, for example. Not the case. And it's people looking at, if they've looked at anything, they've looked at the plans that allow flexibility, and they're doing multiplication and not looking at the overall limit, which is, I think, 550 rooms. So it's important if you have questions to ask, and, you know, that's my job. You know, I'm supposed to keep track of the technical things on this side with staff on your side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, you're welcome. It's actually what is originally Londonderry, when it was first settled in 1719, is what is Eastderry now. And that was the town center. That's where everything, you know, revolved around that, the church. That's where all the original settlers are buried in the graveyard there. That was the original center. And then along came the railroad. Actually, probably first was the separation of Derry and Londonderry. And what was Londonderry Center became Derry. And then the West Parish is what is currently Londonderry now, and that's why originally there was really no defined center. And probably when the rails came in, probably mid-1800s to late 1800s, it generated what is the business area of current Derry now, and then the original center took on the name of East Derry. So there's an evolution there, but also what was happening in Londonderry, where the railroad came through, was was known as the business district, the village up in the north part of town, and that's where the thriving part was, because there was businesses there, people lived there. There's actually a high density of housing there before, you know, our current concept of zoning of residential, commercial, industrial was even developed. So you see a nice mixed use, which at times doesn't coexist too well, but that was the village at the time. And then as the railroad diminished and the automobile came over, that's with the spread and the sprawl of everything. Mm-hmm. So, and I think what people currently in what is, you know, probably the new Londonderry or Londonderry today is probably where the schools are, the police station and everything, and that kind of evolved. The common came. But originally, the churches were there, and Reverend Morrison's meeting house was the original town hall of what was, you know, Londonderry now. So there's been quite an evolving, and this is not to say that things are going to evolve further, but I think people, as John said, prefer to look at the center of Londonderry, where the common is, the churches are, the Grange Hall. Part of that is a historic district also, the schools and everything's together. Not probably the most pedestrian-friendly area or anything, but that's how people look at it now. And probably one of the biggest comments and input I get from people, there's some like it, some don't like it, then there's a lot in the middle, and they just want to be convinced. And what they say is they have concerns about the density, the impact of what the density will have on the rest of the town. Because I think this will eventually create its own village. It'll be separate from the town of Londonderry, but it'll be a village. I mean, governmental-wise, it could be still part of Londonderry, but also in the statutes, they could incorporate it as a separate village within the town of Londonderry. There's many of those that do exist in New Hampshire now, and they have specific governmental duties and everything. But what I'm finding as I start to, walk some of that area, it's just, I haven't really got the handle on it. It's the elephant. And I'm not comfortable. I got to be made comfortable. I think a lot of other people have to be made comfortable also. But one of the things I want to encourage people is to, if they can get out and walk that property and kind of get, some visualization in mind, if that's probably the thing to do. I mean, I've been on there. I haven't asked permission, so I probably should ask permission to
You do.
to venture on there. But the other people would like to walk on the area also, and if they, townspeople have permission to go and walk, not to cause any destruction or anything, but at least to take in the visual and what exists right now and try to, look at what's proposed right now for the master plan, how things would, it's how things fit together. I think that's kind of my thing I'm grappling with, is how it all fits together, and not to cause really not to cause a burden or an impact or loss of anything on the town of Londonderry. We want to make it Londonderry-like, which kind of the most Londonderry-like is the East Dairy.
I think in that vein, I think it might be easy to have open houses where people could come to the site and then walk the site, and we would know when people are on the property and when they're not. Some of the problems that we've been having is people think everything's abandoned. We've had a lot of dumping. We've hauled a number of dumpsters off the property right now. We've had hunters on the property that we've never had before. And so my concern would be, I wouldn't want people just to feel free to walk through the fields, and particularly children. I'd like to have days when, please come, view. We'll have people there. It'll be supervised. You can go anywhere you want. You can do anything you want. But it'd be supervised, and people would be able to help people if somebody fell down or something like that. I just wouldn't want somebody walking out of the property and having an issue or a medical issue and nobody there to attend to them. So I think that would probably be something that we could work with the board to schedule a series of events where people could walk the property.
I think that would be good, because it would allow the public to interact also with you.
And we could be there at the same
Be some
time.
very informal discussions, and, because I think we need to, I think people out there need to talk with each other, they need to talk with us, and they need to talk with themselves, and they need to, generate, some commonality on what this is really gonna be.
I've got a thought on that, but also an additional outreach there. The site does have a website now, woodmontcommons.com,
Okay,
with a lot of information on it.
It's now linked from the town's website as well.
okay.
Yeah,
That was our
Something we
request
said we'd do. and-
We've sent
Yes.
emails out to all the abutters. We're going to have meetings with the abutters apart from these meetings. So it's very much an outreach process that's going to be ongoing throughout this, both formally and informally. Back to the point about walking the property, as a licensed land surveyor and professional engineer, I can tell you that 600 acres of land is a lot to try to take in.
Yes,
And
I'm overwhelmed. No,
I'm not surprised. I know I worked with some loggers up north who would say that a good man, a good logger, in a good day can try to get his arms around 100 acres of land. So I don't know if you want to devote a week walking around and educating yourself, but that's why if you have questions, ask Tim, ask me, and we can be more specific and zero in on, what the issue might be. The land is remarkably consistent. It does have some wetlands. It does have a little bit of steep slopes, especially on the other side of 93, but those grades are all going to change. On the west side of 93, it's pretty consistent. So, it's been agriculture. It's been an orchard for a good long time, so it shows that.
Yes, yeah, that's some of our heritage there, or long before any of us here, but, present time, but.
I'm sure during this winter that you can expect, though, to see some cross-country skiers on the land. And I know people have just done it for years, so, I appreciate there's a change of ownership and everything else. So just, I don't know.
Harder to hurt yourself when you're cross-country skiing than with the snows out there and everything.
Right. I mean, and I'm sure they're, going in pairs or letting people know where they are,
That's fine.
you know. I did go to your website and navigated around a little bit and made a comment on it. And I see how you're building, and I think it's going to be good. And I appreciate, you had some links. There's other websites in town that you might want to link it to as well.
All right.
Okay, and so I'll send that suggestion
Thank you.
forward, but, so I appreciate that you're trying to get the word out there and get people involved. I mean, I'm sure that the people you sent emails to let them know about the website were the people whose emails you gathered during the charrette.
Exactly, Mary. That's exactly right. And everybody that put in their email address received an email letting them know that this project, that this website is up. And we're hoping that starts the interaction. We've also identified, and some people have already asked to be a part of various committees, and we've started that process as well, and that outreach as well. So, again, we're in the baby steps of sneaking up on the elephant.
Excuse me.
Well, a little quick correction, John Michaels just told me the first email that's gone out didn't necessarily go out to all the abutters. It went to the people who signed in during the charrettes.
That's what we were just
So
talking
it's
about.
some of them, but not all of them. But other people who are not abutters as well.
John?
John Michaels, and what we're going to be we have an abutters list, and what we're going to be doing over the next month is sending letters to the abutter. We don't have the emails, so we're going to send and have meetings with them over the next month, but we have to send out letters for that.
Okay. Anyone else on the board? Staff?
I just said one item. I'm going to escape out of the presentation here for a second. In the written part of the master plan, one of the new page that was added to the written portion talks about signage. And it says, except where otherwise modified here, the provisions of 311 of the zoning ordinance are incorporated by reference. I note it says more to come. The one provision I think needs to be taken into account. The majority of the land, if not all of the land on the west side of this project, currently has an underlying zoning of AR1. So unless there's modifications made to that particular section, you're not going to be having much signage as part of this particular package. So that is an area that would need to have some particular attention paid to as part of the signage part of this master plan, because otherwise, only the portion to the east side where it's currently industrially zoned are there really any provisions that take into account the type of signage requirements that are likely to be needed for this type of project. I'd also encourage them to look at creatively, particularly in the village center areas where there's concentrations of the walkable scale commercial development, to try to come up with some consistency and some design consistency in the signage amongst the tenants of the businesses. I've seen that. The one in particular that comes to mind for me is Plymouth, New Hampshire has a great downtown signage program where they have a particular style of sign that really identifies that as downtown Plymouth. I think there's a real opportunity to do something with that here as well.
Yeah, this was just a toe in the water.
I know. I figured that, but I just wanted to bring it up. But outside of that, really the only new information that's been provided to staff at this point is the additional information relative to the firefighting and the signage, as well as the wetland topo map and the new key that Rick had presented in his presentation as well.
Okay,
I'll go back to where we were.
thanks, Tim. Len?
Yeah, just a quick comment. The written part of the master plan, is that intended to be a living document, changing from meeting to meeting?
I intend for it to change based on us coming up with additional materials and your input, yes.
Could you highlight the changes?
Tim
From
just said the only
version-
changes from last month are on page 14, where it's firefighting language and just the start of the signage language.
Right, and I took a look through it and I saw that, but, as the document gets bigger, you'll probably be changing certain sections from month to month.
If it would help, I can turn track changes on, so anything that
Something like that,
changes.
just to help us navigate through what we've
you like
already
that?
seen before.
Sure.
Thank you.
And again, at this point, staff's looking at this as a template. There really isn't any meat to it yet, so I think that there's still a ways to go on that, but I think it's a good suggestion just to show the evolution of the document moving
Right.
forward. It's a good suggestion.
This is the skeleton. now we're adding to it.
Does the board have a sense of if a package like this, it's, it's not there yet, but a package like this of the two things will do it? Do you think that will get us where we need to be in terms of a master plan?
At least from a staff perspective, what I've always envisioned is there being two major components: the plan portion, which would be the large-scale design drawings. Of course, we're electronic at this point, and then the document itself, which would be the written master plan, the written regulations and requirements. So, from my perspective, this is essentially what I was looking for and envisioned when the ordinance was developed.
Yeah, it's kind of like what my expectation was, you'd have the written part, but also you have the visuals and everything that really, both of them will complement each other, and
And I just have a few questions on some of the things that were listed in the permitted uses,
yes.
if I could.
Yeah.
I just wondered what you might envision: assembly, testing, repair, and packing, that kind of facility. What kind of things might they be assembling, packing, testing, and repairing?
That list is straight out of the PUD list of allowed uses, with the exception of truck terminals, which are also allowed, and it took a while for me to get out of there, but I got it out of there. But as an example, there are assembly operations that occur in what you would think was a single-family home of electronic components and that sort of thing, or small machine parts. So we should talk about if that sounds okay, if, earlier tonight there was a huge warehouse proposal that sort of building could have a lot of assembly going on. That's out of scale with a project like this, in my opinion. So,
I'm just.
tell me where I'm
wrong.
wrong.
Okay, research and development, what do you imagine we might be researching and developing in Londonderry?
High tech, anything from circuit boards to software.
Medical.
Medical. Within a range, of course, but when I see components, I think high tech. I think of people working in an office type environment, doing light manufacturing and putting sticks in picks, which was an old Bell Lab phraseology for putting one component into another. I think that would be a good use for a high-tech building. I also see, banking uses, doing software research, those types of scenarios in those particular areas that are designated for your higher rises and your office uses, and the light industrial uses in that type of component building. I think it would make sense to have those kinds of jobs, those high-end jobs that pay well in the area. So that would be a goal, to attract those types of developments here.
Those were the only two things that stuck out that I didn't completely understand.
So, Mr. Chairman, before you go to
Yes.
the public, just one further comment.
Yes.
In my position on the town council, I was speaking with the town manager today, and he expressed an interest in that. He hasn't been updated in some time and would like you guys to get in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, that's definitely part of the loop. Any of our legislative delegation, our state senator, they should be,
Yes, we've been talking with senators and state reps, but we need to do a little more outreach in that regard, according to what the town manager's saying. We need to be a little more inclusive in the loop, so we'll endeavor to do that.
Do you think council needs a presentation now or in a while?
Not at this time, I don't think that. I think what the council's looking at this point is they are, candidly, we are looking at the man who developed the ordinance to give us, good guidance on what this should look like.
Okay.
I think that's the council's position at this point, and they're waiting and watching, the process work its way out.
Okay.
anything else from the board? I'm going to go to the public, and we're looking for the input, so feel free. Get the microphone up here, just name and address. Let us know what's on your mind. Just listening tonight, I guess. I think you're kind of like us. It's kind of like listening and I call it discovery phase.
Mike, so,
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Speltz, 18 Sugar Plum. If I can just give a quick primer to everybody about public access, because it came up here. Under New Hampshire law, if land is not posted, it is considered to be open to pedestrian access. So, as far as I know, at least the land on the west side has not been posted. And so, people have a right under state law to have pedestrian access for skiing, hiking, whatever. That state law also provides protections for the landowner in that if there is an accident on the property, unless the landowner is guilty of gross negligence, the state protects them from liability to a person who was taking advantage of the open nature of the land and got injured. I don't know what the status of the land was under the previous owner, but I'm sure it was in current use. There are different levels of current use. If you allow the land to stay open, if you don't post it, and it's in current use, you have a lower tax rate than if it's in current use, but you post it. So it could have been posted, not allow people on it, but still been an orchard and still qualified for current use. It's a different and less favorable current use tax rate. So I would just caution you to find out what status you're in and then take the appropriate action if you want to make a change. So that's just kind of for the benefit of the applicant. I had one question on the narrative, and I think it occurs on page, let's see. So, sorry, wrong document.
Too much paper.
Page 5 of the Woodmont Commons Master Plan says that within E1 and W1, any use may change its location, so long as, et cetera. Then that actually is limited a little bit, because on page 6 it says residential uses to remain, and basically that's the guarantee that on the outside of the property it will remain residential. So those two provisions are in conflict with each other right now. I suspect that the intent was for the more narrow limitation to limit the broad one, but in the future revision, I think it would be good to make that clear. It's within E1 and W1, any use may change with an exception, noted later on, if that is your intent. Can you clarify that? Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not disagreeing with what Mr. Spelt says with regards to access to land, but I think I heard something different from the landowner. What I heard is he throwing this change thing around, but what I heard is things have changed. We have people on the property dumping. We have possible vandals, and we have hunters on the land for the first time ever. So what I think I hear the landowner saying is, it's not what it used to be, so work with me so that I can make sure that none of these things affect you. I don't think hear him objecting to anybody going on the land, but I think what he's saying is I think we just need to be a little bit more careful, because I'm not sure exactly what's going on and things have changed. And I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but that's what I thought I heard.
You're not. That's exactly right. I don't want somebody out there saying the pretty turkeys and somebody's got a shotgun and is beaming on them and shoot some people who thought the turkeys were pretty and by a mistake. So I'm just, that's just something that's coming up, and we've actually posted some security at times to keep people from bringing trash onto the property. So I just want to make people aware of it, that things are taking place and things are changing.
I think, at least some supervision, looking at the property and having, like you people there for questions and answers will probably be more helpful, because when I've walked some of it, it's just kind of like, it's, all I can think of is nice orchard.
We do have people there on a regular basis. Some of the workers that worked in the farm are still there and will remain there. And we do have an office there, and we do have somebody there at least 4 to 5 hours a day. So if people want to just stop by and talk to Josh, who's the manager there, feel free to do so.
I'm getting the impression that perhaps you might want us to work with staff in coming out with a process of how to get through this approvals process. Is that a possible?
A big yes.
Streamline it, yeah.
Yes, because this is, there's so much here. I mean,
I
I'm trying to
sense you're
digest.
facing a tidal wave, and you want to have it brought down the sluiceway a little bit so we can,
We gotta break it into some bits and pieces, and
I still think getting together once a month is a great idea for both
Yes.
the public and yourselves, and just keep the dialogue open, and then continue to work with staff to build the framework,
Yeah, I think that's
and then
great.
just update once a month, because I think that would be a little more inclusive and would help not only the public, but the board itself
Right.
as to where we're at and compare and contrast. We'll be able to ask questions.
And this
So-
is helpful to get your updates every so often, so, absolutely.
yeah, I think we gotta have that personal touch. And I think townspeople want that also. It's-
I also see that as we're narrowing down, we're gonna need more and more time, and we might need to dedicate time to, as we go along, I think we're gonna find that we're gonna need more time for review as well. So, it's a little overwhelming right now, and I understand that, but I think as we go through the winter here, I think, the next couple of meetings will really start to define where we're gonna be at, and we might need to dedicate a little more time to it.
Yes. Mary? Name and address, please.
Mary Tatro, 15 Isabella. Talking about the tidal wave of information, what I would really like to see is a plan where you say, in year 1, we're going to do this. In year 2, we're going to do this. In year 3, in year 10. First of all, right in the first, how many years is it? You're not even going to do the eastern side, correct? How many years away is that?
At a minimum, 4 or 5.
So if you took just your scale, 4 or 5 years, right? So instead of showing people this huge, almost incomprehensible amount of development, you could just say, here we go. Like those diagrams of the human body, here's the heart, here's the lungs, this page, so that people won't be so scared.
I know, Mary, but I think because of the way the master plan PUD is written, they
Yeah.
have to show us the body, and then they can come in with the body parts. To go with your analogy.
There needs to be some direction and some understanding between the developer and the board as to where this is going before they can really start breaking this into a phasing schedule. The phasing schedule, as is noted in the key on the page you see here, is in progress, but it really needs a bit more development of the overall plan itself before we really get to the point where we can start presenting phasing of the project.
Right.
Well, Mary, I have to say, I was totally speechless after your comment on the body parts, and that's good, because I have a lot of concerns about this project, but I also see how it could be a really great and exciting thing. And people fear what they don't know. Nobody likes change. Although some of us liked the change in 2008, a lot of people are afraid of change. And there was,
Get that in, huh, Mary?
well, I wanted to
come back up
represent
here
the
just to get
Democrats
that
in
in.
here. So
Hey, I'm a registered independent.
I'm loving it, So I think for PR purposes, as we go forward, and you have to scope out this whole giant project, but if you said, hey, let's talk about the elbow today.
Well, we will be talking about the elbow,
Well,
but
that's
first we have
good.
to have the body.
Okay,
Yeah, well,
thank you.
So we get the skeleton
So
developed.
many places with this conversation right now.
Anyone else? We'll be doing this again and again. There'll be a lot of opportunity anyway, because email, send letters, buttonhole us when you see us. Jim, hey, you want to sit up here?
Back. Jim and Agnes, resident, long time. One question, very long.
Former chairman of the planning board.
You do have
We
an
don't want
alternate
that.
position open.
Boston North made an agreement with the town of Londonderry and Derry to build 4A. And to my recollections, because it was a long time ago, Londonderry was putting in 5 million, Derry was putting in 5 million, and they were taking care of the rest. Now that you bought Boston North, are you going to do that?
Number one, I didn't buy Boston North.
You bought the land?
A person who's working with me bought Boston North, and all the rights happen to it. They're out of Boston. I know them, and they're working with me. And all the commitments remain in place. It's been reaffirmed in Derry, and there's been a legal, Tupper, I think, was their representative, and they accepted their obligations under the terms of the agreement. And I know that the town of Londonderry has agreed to, and knows that they are participating, and we are participating monetarily with it, and we're working with the state and the federal government to make sure that 4A is a reality. And that's where we're at. And
So you're not saying, are you going to foot the bill for the rest of it, or is the federal government or the state
we're working with the state in that regard currently.
to help you out?
I don't think that anybody could build that currently. Back when this was originally proposed, it was a much smaller project, and it was a much smaller commitment. So, no, the commitment is not by this developer to fund it in its entirety.
That's the way it was sold to the town. The other thing was sold to the town, there would be no west access. So what does that do with the contract between Londonderry and the old Boston North if west side goes in? Because I believe town vote said, or discussion at that time, that there would be no access. Does that null and void our obligation?
I don't believe that it does. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to get into the legalese of it
Well,
tonight.
you don't have to answer it, because I'm not a lawyer, and that was a question I'd like answered from somebody that knows.
Thank you.
Second, these buildings, residential, commercial, what is the ratio of the buildings when you first erect them? Is it going to be 60% residential, 40% commercial, or what, or haven't you any idea?
Well, I have a framework, and we're working with this board to conduct that framework and to determine what those frameworks are so that we can move ahead in a logical manner. We're very premature into the process right now, and that is a part of the discussion that's with this board and this developer.
Well, then, that's a question later that could be answered, correct?
It'll be in the Phase 1 development
It'll be in the
plans.
Phase 1 development plans, absolutely right.
And these residential buildings, are some of them multifamily?
If you look at the buildings already proposed in the written portion of the master plan, you'll see that they're multifamily, single-family apartments, whole range,
And how many units per dwelling, living units?
from 1 to an undetermined number.
How many?
1 to an undetermined number.
Are you going to exceed the zoning of Londonderry?
This process is creating a new zoning ordinance for this property.
I understand, but then it creates a box for us that another person comes in and put residential in. If you let them do it, why can't I do it?
Anybody
Jim.
can, if you've got enough land,
You understand what I'm saying?
Jim,
Yeah,
I
this
don't
is
wanna-
gonna, this is
it's a
gonna,
negotiation. We have to, they can't come in and say 48 units, and we can say, no.
I understand
It's
that,
a
but
negotiation.
I'm just opening for thought. If you do, you got Pandora's box open because everybody else will want to do it.
Well-
I'm putting a thought in their head not to do it. Because I would
Okay.
not do it unless I do it for everybody.
but this is just part of the discussion that's going to go on, what's gonna work.
I think you
best.
know what our behavior is like up here.
There are going to be some multifamily that will have commercial underneath.
I hope so.
And where does the people park when they use the commercial side?
In a parking space.
Across the street, you will have a parking garage or a parking area?
We might, that's all after this process.
Because I know Portsmouth, which you mentioned before, is building parking garages so they can park people. over there
Mr.
in
Chairman,
parking
a
garages.
point of order, could Mr. Sinagnis direct his questions to the board, and then the board direct them to us, please?
Yeah.
Parliamentary
yeah,
procedure.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is probably
Arthur,
conjecture at
let's
this
go
point.
formal. I'm asking you, are they going to have a parking garage? Now, you can ask them,
Yeah.
We've already conceptually shown it. We
Yeah,
did that.
I think
Conceptually.
I think there's some on there because of,
Look at,
you know, with the density, it could be like on-street parking, but there also could be, you know, parking garages. You know, it's one of the things I think we're trying to grapple with
First of all,
is
sir,
one
I'm
with,
not for this project, I'm not against it. I'm here to ask questions. And that's all I'm here for. The question is, you cannot change your zoning unless you know what's gonna happen.
well, this is what the discussion
Correct.
going on now with the,
So I'd like to see these questions asked and taken care of.
yeah.
and
We probably can't take care of them today or
I
or
just-
tonight, but, you know,
I just hear talking of a dream.
we're gonna be, yeah, there's a lot of, you know, this is very early in the whole process, so.
Who is?
Yeah,
We are,
we
we all
are.
are.
We
It's
all
zoning,
are.
Arthur, You're not new to zoning.
Well, PUDs, I'm trying to,
You shouldn't be new to ideas. You've been through how many?
been through a lot of them,
Yeah,
but,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else? Marty?
After all this, I'd like to, Martin Srugas, 17 Wimbledon Drive. I thought maybe end this, hopefully, on a positive note. Looking around here, I see people mostly my age. And this project really is not geared toward people our age as much as we may think it is. It's really geared toward the younger folks. And what I'd like to see people is bring some folks in who are under 40 and let them experience this, let them see this, what this project is about. Because it's really geared toward the future, 20 years ahead. By the time this project is finished, as I said before, they're going to be taking my driver's license away. So I think, you know, we need to
We need the
bring some
village.
younger people in
We'll
here.
have the building for it.
I think we got a little bit too many older people in here for this project, and I think we need to see a younger face.
My experience.
Hey, Jimmy, you want to get back up?
When I talk with people in their 20s, they all love it. You know, this is the thing, because I think the younger generation today and what's going to be in the future, or somewhat in the future anyway, are looking for, you know, a place where they can be very, very mobile, but not a big place, a place that someone else can take care of things around them, so they can just come, sleep, take off, do the things, but also they like around them, their friends. And that's why a lot of them are gravitating more toward the cities, you know, urban situation. I mean, Somerville, Massachusetts used to be, you know, the pit of the state of Massachusetts.
They're going to write
But
letters.
now it's very, very upscale, and I mean, for the people who live there a long time, it's driven the rent sky high, but it's changed in like, you know, 20 years. So I think Marty has a lot to say, is that, you know, yes, we do think of it in our terms, but we got to think about what's coming along and encourage younger people to get involved with this also, what they want, so.
So, Mr. Chair, to that end, if people were to go to the planning board page on the town website, they could see the conceptual plans from November 10th, they could see the PowerPoint presentation from November 10th, they could see the written plan template from November 10th, they can see the planned unit development section of Londonderry's zoning ordinance, and they can see the developer's website, which has just opened up.
And tomorrow, the stuff that was submitted here tonight should be uploaded.
Should be up there, so there's lots of little places for them, for you to add all those things as we go along through this process. So people can follow along, and, you know, that would be wonderful if we had, you know, younger people that are gonna be here for 40 years, you know, come to the meetings and express their opinions.
Yes, yes.
And one last thing, Mr. Chairman, one thing I would like to request, and is that you contact Ron Campo, who's the president of LAFA. Right behind us, there are 1,400 children who participate in the LAFA baseball and softball programs. On any given time, there can be, you know, 1,000 to 2,000 people right behind us. If you could come in the spring and start reaching out to the community that way, to the people who don't read the newspaper and don't listen to these meetings and everything. These are the young families of this town. And, you know, maybe you can work something out with Mr. Campo, that you can set something up near the snack stand there and start explaining to people what's happening. I mean, about 4 years ago, we did a survey trying to figure out how to do a small area master plan. So we went from bleacher to bleacher and asked, hey, what do you want to see at exit 5? It was amazing what we heard. But, you know, if you could work in that way where the community, it's just not this room, it's all of them. You know, the people that don't have the time, who are working 2 jobs, and hear what they have to say as we go through this process. I mean, that's really what I want to hear.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I know what I know, but I don't know what I don't know.
Sure.
Mike?
And while Mike's coming up, if you do get in touch with him, there's also sign-ups in January and February and tryouts in March. So, I mean, it's another way to reach these people.
Incidentally, he's also the chairman of the school board, so.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Mike Speltz, 18 Sugar Plum. Just 2 things, going from the general to specific. That the PUD ordinance says that the PUD master plan will take precedence over the underlying subdivision site plan regs. On the other hand, in areas where the PUD master plan doesn't address an issue, we then turn to those underlying subdivision site plan regs for guidance on what can be permitted and what can't be. So there's a tension there. You know, on one end of the spectrum, you could rewrite an entire set of site and subdivision regs and get it all in the master plan,
Not necessarily the site and subdivision regs, it would be the zoning.
and the zoning.
Yes.
On the other hand, you could, you know, go not much beyond this and then rely on the existing things, neither extreme of which is desirable. And I'm curious to know, both from the applicant, you know, what his intentions are and how specific to get in the master plan, how much to rely on the underlying regulations, and to hear from the planning board on what their expectations are. But to move this process along, I noticed that Tim has patiently left probably the most important slide up there for us all to contemplate. And I think it would be a useful objective to have the applicant and the staff come up with a schedule that they're going to bring those planning products forward. And it probably won't be in the order that they're on the screen, because some things depend on other things. But I'm trying to look for a way to move this process forward, and it seems like laying out that schedule in conjunction with some idea of how much specificity we're going to get into in the master plan would be worthwhile. Thank you.
Tim, is it fair to say, excuse me, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm sorry. Is it fair to say that whatever zoning is determined in the master plan, the regulations that fall in that zoning are what will be, well, we will have to follow when they come forward with their site
With the
plans?
site plans and subdivisions,
Right.
correct.
So once the zoning is decided for the area, Mike, that site and those site regulations have to be followed.
Correct.
No, I'm talking about Mike Speltz.
I know that.
An unfortunate thing, Mike. And neither one of us are helping Marty out with this program very much.
Marty said we were going home.
The words in the ordinance are, where specific development standards are neither stated nor implied in the PUD master plan.
But we would make sure that they are. The zoning would be in place for a specific area before as one member of the, let me stop there, one member of the planning board, I would want to be sure that all of the zoning is clearly identified for whatever areas, so that there wouldn't be any ambiguity.
There has to be a lot of that taking place, again, because the majority of this land, the underlying zoning is AR1.
Right, but I'm saying we're.
Absolutely.
We are planning to change the zoning
Absolutely.
because of the PUD.
But
I
it's
think I
not-
can help, I think I can help with your concern. This package of materials that you have, the plans are more evolved than the written portion. I had 1 or 2 meetings with Tim and John, but basically I had to come up with a framework that, interestingly, happens to fit with what Tim had in his mind for how to do this. But I wanted to get feedback from you folks before, really getting into it and wordsmithing it. So, we will be doing that. There is zero intention to pull the wool over anybody's eyes here. We want to, Mike wants to build, and his partners want to build a really exemplar project, and I want to do everything I can to help. And I know staff is of the same mind. So there's no hidden agenda, there's no hide the ball. Everything is whatever it takes in terms of time and, getting it right. That's what we want to do.
Yeah, I think that's the way this board feels, and I think that's the way people feel also. I think it's going to be evolutionary. I think we're going to have to work at it. We're going to have to negotiate. We're going to have to discuss. We're going to have to come up with something that's acceptable for everyone.
But at the end of the day, it's actually not, I think you're going to be surprised at the end of the process that it's really not that hard, because it's a rezoning. It's a more complicated rezoning than usual, but that's what this process is. It's not, getting all the details of a site plan
Right,
done
exactly.
correctly. We'll get there. That'll be the next step.
Right.
If I may finish up, Mary, the rest of that thing I was quoting says, where you don't have it in the PUD master plan, the most appropriate standards otherwise applicable from zoning ordinance, site plan regulations, subdivision regulations shall apply as determined by the planning board. So it isn't just zoning. It's not just the colored map with a list of uses that are permitted along with conditions. It's all of the things that are in your subdivision regs and your planning regs that talk about any number of things, from drainage to traffic to structures to setbacks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm just reminding the board that either the master plan will be quite lengthy and specific and complicated, or we will rely heavily on our existing regulations. And
That's a completely fair statement.
Right.
Yes.
That's why we wrote it that way.
Yeah, and as the operative of there is as determined by the planning board.
right.
And I'm assuming that if it gets too convoluted in between going with our existing ordinance, the underlying district, and this, my guess is that the applicant will come back and revise the master plan to reflect whatever is going to go in that particular area.
Yes.
And I think doing a schedule to accomplish those things would move you along toward, being able to define that better.
And
And I think that's what you're going to do,
Yes,
working with
I
Tim.
think we're going to
working
get
with staff.
Andre?
And I think, like most of the planning initiatives that we've done over the last decade, there's always that attempt to have workshops to try to solicit input. And I think it's almost a wait and see and say, well, come up with something that we can shoot it down or pick it up, depending on what you come up with. So I think we're at that point where I think we got a lot of input from the charrettes and from the first meeting, or at least some input, but I think it's just a matter of sitting down and putting a little bit more meat to the bones, saying, I think this gives us a step towards creating the PUD. What do you think? And then having a little bit more something substantive to react to. But I think right now, in order to move this along, I think that's what we need to do.
Okay, anything else? Yes, sir.
I may be able to answer some of your questions.
Name and address,
possibly. Jim
please.
Butler, 57 Mammoth Road. During the charrettes, the design had indicated that a lot of the parking, unless this is going to change, but I thought that people felt comfortable with the designer's response to it, a lot of that parking is going to be hidden behind the buildings, is that correct? And is that something that is still your desire?
Parking is generally not in the front of buildings, correct?
All right, so I mean, I think, unless they change it, the designer had designed in that most of the parking was going to be behind the buildings, and that as far as a parking garage, that it was my understanding at that stage that there was one parking garage, and that was an agreement that was going to be made, I think, between the developer and the state, because we wanted to move, quote, a hotel up, and there was going to be a give and take there. So do you perceive several parking garages in this type of development?
I know that we've only talked about one
Oh,
currently,
that's
and
what I
that's on the southerly side. We've always anticipated it, and
And that was for the bus facility,
that's correct.
the park and ride.
You know the question I
Yeah.
have?
And all you have to do is read.
Just
Thank you for answering it.
You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
Okay. We didn't want to be here all night, Giannis.
I'm only the director of engineering for the town, so I think this is kind of important
this
that
is like
I might say something, you know?
I think they got 2 or 3 days for you.
I think it would take more than 3 to 4 days, you know, to discuss and develop this, but
How about the short
what I
executive
wanted
summary?
to,
That's,
what I wanted to stress are that what Mike said, not you, but Mike said, I think is very important about analyzing and going and stressing each of these points that is right now on the slide, because that master plan could be 3 inches thick, but if you only identify, and you're going to make this very short, in say 10 pages or whatever, now each site that will be brought up to the planning board might have then bunch of variances and waivers, because now each different setbacks could be applied. They don't know that yet, how they will apply this. So at what point, I think my question was, we will go into those details. If we don't, it's perfectly all right, and then what Mary's saying, yes, we will rely on the regulations that we have in place. But I envision that I don't think they want to follow those regulations, because they were already looking at changing the standards from drainage roads and everything else. So then if we do not address this in a master plan, then we will have to go through each site plan, and at what point you will ask for variances or waivers. I think that's what I think Mike was asking, if I understand correctly.
Just quickly to address the variance issue, it's not really built into this ordinance to have variances from the standards from a master plan. In order to vary from the standards of a master plan, you got to come back and redo the master plan. There really can't be a variance to something established as part of a PUD master plan. They would have to come back to the board to amend that plan before they would be able to move forward with something like that.
okay.
So it should be
That's
then
when they
addressed
design-
master plan.
That's why when they design a specific area and they say this area is going to be commercial, that's all it's going to be is commercial, and everything
And
that's
that's where you
underlying.
develop the standards for that
Right.
particular area. We'll have these setbacks, these requirements,
Right.
these parking. That's, there's a lot of work still to be done on this.
Right.
There's-
I mean, the master plan is just the really the very beginning of it. It's the,
It'll become its own zoning book, much like we have one for the town. There will be one for this.
yes.
For this master plan.
Oh, Jim, you can have the seat up here if you want, you know?
Arthur, you don't remember how late we used to be here. Relax.
I know, this is.
I only have one question, and I'll ask you so you can ask them. The Boston North property that they bought owns the Boston and Maine Railroad right away from their property to 28. Are they going to use that as an access?
I don't know
You
the
can ask
answer to it, but is there, I don't know who owns what anyway, so.
I believe that's in Derry.
Well, no, actually, a portion of it is in Londonderry. The majority of it is in Derry. And Boston North, the Hyrax is the owner of that piece of property. And yes, they do have the rights to that. And yes, they do own it in fee simple. And they have, we have committed with them to ensure that that goes away and becomes a public right-of-way for the possibility of train or trails. And we've stated that at the charrette as well.
Because I think there was a train station or something.
And
in
we
that.
have a train
in.
station designed and envisioned for it in the charrette master design. And